I'll see you guys in the dark.
So for some background, I am a woman. I'm using a throwaway account, and I've changed the names due to the material shared, and that this is the current and still ongoing through court proceedings. So for the purpose of this story, I will call my ex Wang. Wang was a grown man living in the city with his mom and sisters. I was a country girl in a rural Australia. We met 16 years ago through the internet dating, and after some time of him traveling back and forth, we moved in together. Things were great, and I was treated how a real man is supposed to treat a woman. But all that changed with the flick of some internal switch in his head. Suddenly, I discovered what a psychopath is. No, not a narcissist, and not just the word people throw around all the time in conversation. The proper psychopath. The one that meets every red flag in the checklist. Anyway, so began 9.5 years of abuse. Google different types of domestic violence. I endured every single one of those, but without that cycle the professionals talk about. From beating the crap out of me and strangulation when I was pregnant, with his child, to checking the odometer on the car, tracking my kilometers, and counting receipts. There was only one apology, and it wasn't meant. There were never flowers, or a honeymoon phase, or a build-up. He never took any substances, was never under the influence of alcohol, and didn't have any mental health issues. Anyhow, let's go to the crazy part of the story. Not that all of that wasn't crazy as it was. It is well known that most dangerous time for a person from an abusive relationship is when they leave, so I will skip the beginning of the part of the story. After 9.5 years, I finally called the police. Not before he uttered the words about killing me and taking the children somewhere no one will ever find them. If you feel like you want to ask or say the ridiculous, why didn't you just leave before? Then you are part of the problem in the world. Do some research. Anyway, the police finally arrived 2 hours after my 000 call. 000 is Australia's emergency number. Neither officer was actually prepared to make an arrest. Neither were in uniform. Neither had a weapon or handcuffs. And they had to call for a backup divvy van to be able to arrest him. So here begins the proceedings, 5 years of torment, both by him and the justice system. Police bailed him to his relative's address, a block away, and the magistrate ruled, when making a restraining order, that it was perfectly acceptable for him to drive by my house whenever he wanted in case he was going to work. He was, and still is, a dull bludger, and also allowed him to make phone calls every day. So at this point, a relative of mine comes up to stay with me and the kids. They don't sleep. I barely sleep. Every day we are finding fresh smoke butts, not only around the front of the house, though also by the back door, which is behind a 6-foot fence. Wang is a smoker. After seeing Wang driving past the house every day, and fearing for the safety of the children, I leave and go to the safety of the relatives in another town with the children. A detective calls me a few days later with concerns of my welfare. His station has a request from Wang for a welfare check on the child, and obviously the house was empty. Now, if you're not familiar, in Australia, if there are no current family court orders, then it is presumed, regardless of any restraining orders or the family history, that both parents have equal and shared responsibility for any children from the relationship. Therefore, a dangerous and violent ex is well within their rights to use the police to locate the other parent and children by requesting a welfare check on their children at any address they have. This is perfectly legal. Having done the check, police inform the checkers yes or no the children are at the address and are safe and well. This can be done to narrow or even locate where you are hiding, and the police must respond to such requests. On top of that, this request was made after a vehicle was pulled over by police, less than a block away from where we had lived. At this time, Wang did not know we ran to the place of hiding. Inside that vehicle, police found Wang, 2 cousins of his, and a friend of his, as well as a shotgun. Remember that Australia has a strict gun law. That is not an area known for hunting. It's actually a suburb in a large rural town. None of the individuals in the car had a gun license or a gun registered to them. Of course, Wang was not penned for the weapon, and I was informed that police could not keep us safe. We stayed at this relative's place for a few months, and only upon leaving she informs me in the fact. She had seen Wang just standing outside of her kitchen window nearly every single night, in the middle of the night, just staring back. Not scary, right? Except when you find out that this relative's property was interstate from the previous place Wang and I lived. 5 hours away, actually. Wang had no relatives or known associates in this town. Her property was down a long driveway, off a highway, and literally right next door to a police training facility. Also, during this period, a judge felt that Wang's act of strangulation did not warrant any form of consequence, and he was allowed to walk from the courthouse a completely free man with no record on him. Given all this, we again fled, this time into yet another state, 3,000 kilometers away. Wang would have to be pretty bloody determined to get me if we were to make that trek. Turns out he was. It's November of 2014. I am trying to rebuild our broken lives far away from a torturous monster, and finally beginning to feel safe. I mean, we are far, far away. It's 10 p.m., and I'm hanging sheets out of the clothing line. The way this house is situated, it is a duplex, and a rear one for that matter, in a brand new estate that was not yet on digital mapping devices, or even known to emergency service GPS yet. No Google Earthing it, or old school mapping it would locate it. And my duplex isn't even visible by road. In fact, you wouldn't have even known there was one way back there. It looked as though it was just one house. To get to my door, you had to walk up a steep driveway and go through the side gate of the property that looked as though it led to the backyard of a house. So back to that night's event. I am hanging sheets on the line. Child had wet the bed again, and I hear a muffled type of cough sound. I glance to my left where the side gate is, and there is a gloved hand through the hole in the gate for a latch, and half a foot inside the gate. Now people say in situations like these that they get the chills. Not for me. My body tensed, and I am certain the whole thing went. Fuck. My brain just switched itself off for a few seconds. The intruder knew that I knew that they were there. I, in the best voice I could muster, which was more like a stuttering whisper, said, "I'm getting the dog," and not even looking away, began walking backwards into the open sliding door, closing it shut and locking it. Now I could feel my body. I could feel my heart, and certain it was about to pound out of my chest. My head was spinning, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I managed to steady my hand enough to call the police, and they turn up eventually. The intruder was gone. A week later, I get a phone call from Wang, who says he hasn't been able to call the kids because he just flew back into the city the other day. Then immediately corrected his slip of the tongue and said he was away for work. His call breached the terms of the restraining order, and so I made a report to the police. They looked into his particulars and discovered that in fact he had purchased a return plane ticket to my city a few days before I had run into my intruder. Police put 2 and 2 together and arranged for a security update to be done on my property, but I didn't feel safe staying, so we moved. Did that stop Wang? No. I got a phone call the following February, and am informed Wang has been charged with very familiar offenses, as I have previously reported, against someone else, and they wanted my formal statement. I gave them one. Then, feeling unsafe due to someone sneaking around the house late at night, we again moved, and I am informed that Wang has been charged with several offenses related to my statement. I'm not talking about assault or a breach. I'm talking so serious the charges are to be heard in a Supreme Court with a judge and a jury with a maximum of 25 years each charge. If found guilty, yes, Australia's system is a joke to victims of crime. We need one like America's, where life, in most cases, because of 25 years here, is more often than not a maximum of 7 with parole in 2. Nope, not kidding. And fellow Aussies can attest to that as well. So my children and I are rebuilding and getting on with life, except for he creates a dating profile using old pictures that were taken when we were together, by using my old email address and locking me out so I couldn't delete the profile. Creates bills in my name and makes reports to Social Security in order to try and have my payments cut, stating I'm married or working. I am neither. I have PTSD. Doing either is far difficult to comprehend. Not only that, but every time I mention is to be heard at court in relation to Wang and the criminal proceedings, I find damage to my property. Nothing major, but something indiscreet, enough to let me know, hey, I was here, and I know you live here. The rear door has been broken into, the fly screen cut on the front window, car broken into, but nothing stolen despite there being valuables inside it, twice. The side gate broken, the front door attempted to be broken into more than once, the motion sensor light smashed. I set up security lights in an attempt to dissuade this piece of crap, and he obviously had no idea. One morning, I wake up to see blood in the pathway leading up to my front gate, and firm fingerprints made in blood, where someone was obviously stood holding the gate watching my house, bleeding. They must have had a weapon. My theory is that he was startled by the security lights that came on and hurt himself. On top of all that, this last hoorah was slashing 2 tires of my car parked in front of my house. All this crap happened 5 years after leaving Wang, during which time he had gone and created a new family and was still facing criminal proceedings. Did it end here? I wish, since being charged due to the cultural background of Wang. He has a lawyer for free, one who has a sweet-talked into believing he is completely innocent and wrongly accused. I say this as his lawyer is determined to beat the charges he is on. They are holding this by finding loopholes in the law, restricting what can be said about the events that occurred during the relationship, arguing against the law that prohibits husbands from being excluded from charges with crimes due to it being contained with a marriage, requesting information pertaining to the entire background, including foster care records and mental health records, school reports and referrals going all the way back to when I was 9 years of age. Yes, from when I was a child, before I even knew Wang existed, in an effort to find something to sway a jury into not guilty beyond reasonable doubt, even extending so far as to challenge the Constitution. Criminal proceedings have been going on for the last 4 years and set to continue into next year, not allowing me to let go. Monsters exist. They're parading around as people that are meant to love and protect you. So please, be wary. This happened yesterday, but it has a huge amount of backstory. So to begin, if you check my post history, you'll see I often give advice to victims of abuse and have re-encountered my own domestic violence. I have 4 kids, one who is 28 and has Asperger's, and my husband and I take care of him. Good kid, a little eccentric. My middle 2 are a 16-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter, both who have ADHD. The son more severe than the other, and I have a little one who has just turned 4. First, I was with a much older man that I had my first son with. He had girlfriends, lots of them. I left after 10 years. I thought maybe some of his behaviors were due to his generation and some macho viewpoints. I met a younger man. I thought, well, he'll understand the female view. Was raised by a single mom. I had just gotten involved with a pit bull that would never let go. It started slowly. He would say things when angry that I didn't take personally because they weren't true. Tried but failed to destroy my self-esteem. He liked to wrestle with me playfully. I should have taken note when the dog didn't like it one day and tried to bite him. I think he sensed the actual intent. He was testing to see if I could take him, I think. Then there was a push, a shove. I made a big deal out of it, but he was sorry. He finally got a job. His first paycheck went to the booze and drugs. He was a user. mostly of me and my kindness. I wasn't happy and wanted to get him out. I sensed that this would be difficult. I started to have fainting spells. I found out that I was pregnant. By this time, there had been a few incidents of slapping. The doctor went through the questionnaire, and I was truthful. I was being abused. I did some reading, noticed there was a time pattern. 6 days. I am sorry. Tension building, explosions. 6 days in between. I knew one was coming, so when he was yelling at me, I told him to slap me. Go ahead. That's what you want to do anyways. He said I was crazy and left the room. I avoided it that time. The buildup was worse because he didn't get to hit me. 6 days later, I did the same. He took me up on it this time. I got to defend myself. I beat him up pretty good too. I realized I couldn't call the cops as I knew he would lie and say I hit him first. He had marks on him. It also felt terrible to hit someone. I said that I would never hit anyone ever again, even in defense of myself. 6 days later, I sat on my hands as he tried to take my eye out with his thumb, ripped out a grapefruit-sized bald spot in my long hair, choked me. He said he was going to kill me and the baby inside me. I pressed charges after I rewired the phone into the wall. I was almost 3 months pregnant at this point. I went into hiding while the police found him a month later. He harassed one of my friends so bad at work she almost lost her job. I had the baby and got full custody. At some point, I stupidly gave it in to him and exhausted from the 60 phone calls a day. I got pregnant with my daughter. He threatened to kill me, so I pressed charges once again. He was assessed so dangerous that they installed a system in my house with a panic button directly to the police. Visitation was managed through his family, but that tapered off after a while. 3 years of stalking, leaving letters, threatening to burn the house down with all of us in it. I refused to speak to him. He got a girlfriend and started leaving me alone. I was part of a university study into how victims permanently leave. This data helps our justice system identify risk factors and support to help victims successfully leave abusive partners. In 2011, the kids have not seen him in 5 years. No visits, no contact from his family to set that up. He files for sole custody, saying I kept the kids from him. I spent $12,000 just to get the pre-trial. He was arrested doing a B&E during this. Drug testing, alcohol counseling, supervised visits. He refused to get the counseling. They closed the file. He abandoned them again, in front of the court this time. A few months later, he was arrested for DUI and went to jail. Shortly after this, I got married to a high school friend I had been with for 4 years. Yesterday, we came home from work. My husband works in security. He was dressed and ready to go. My daughter and baby son were with us. I get out of the vehicle, and something made me look at this guy on the bike. Like the hair stood up on my arms, and I had to look closer. It was my ex. He was smiling at my daughter. I got the kids in the house and told my husband, "That is my ex." Oh my God. I know my ex very well, and as the saying goes, some things just never change. I knew he would bike around our house. I went out the front door and snapped a picture of him as he biked past. My husband went out back to see if he circled around again. He found him looking in our vehicle. My husband punched him, and he went flying. I could hear yelling from inside the house. My husband said, "Call 911. My ex was screaming, "Your kids are in danger now." He talked to some guys across the back alleyway who witnessed all of this. Sorry for the disturbance and so forth. They were boarding up the house, as it hasn't been rented for a while. They told my husband my ex had been breaking in there for over a year, that it was also a drug flop house, and they'd frequently caught him squatting. He had been watching us for a year, maybe more. My husband had broken a bone in his hand. I kissed it better along with some other things later. My kids heard me on the 911 call. They never knew why I had left their father. I never wanted them to think badly of themselves or worry that they were like him. Cops came and they caught him a short distance away. I heard them checking his warrants and the bike he was on. They said he had 2 failures to appear in court and was on conditions at certain addresses. Some things just never change. We found out this morning what had happened. They may have just sobered him up and took him home. I planned to get a peace bond. I explained everything to the kids. They were scared, confused, upset, angry that I hadn't told them this. I explained carefully to my husband that this was only the beginning. We had to add cameras to our security system. The kids will have to be careful. He threatened his own kids. Begone with you, X. You especially don't want to meet again with my husband, who protects his wife, and raised your kids while you drug abused and stalked all of us. Let's not meet. I may have changed my opinion on defending myself. So this happened last year, lasting around 9 months. I'm from Bermuda, yes, like the triangle, and I was in Leesburg, Florida for college. I've always had a hard time making friends, and since I was new, I had an even harder time. So I used Tinder to find friends or potential partners. I was on Tinder one day after striking out with someone previously. I saw my ex's profile and figured I could do worse, so I swiped and we matched. I realized now that this was just a rebound. He told me he was in an open relationship at the time and about things his boyfriend did to him. So I felt bad for him. During the first 2 dates, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I spent a few days over at his parents' house and found out that his home life was like, which made me feel even worse for him. Turns out he'd been homeschooled all his life, and his parents were, and still are, degenerates. One night we were at his place, and he told me he loved me, and it had only been a week at this point. Honestly, that alone should have been a red flag, but I ignored it. Fast forward to when I was in Bermuda for the summer. It was 4.5 months of agony. At the time, my ex was overly dependent and problematic. If I said even the slightest thing wrong, normally talking points, like things I noticed that were particularly unhealthy, or things that impacted me negatively, I was in for at least an hour of self-pity. I was stressed every day. I was pretty much having to walk on eggshells for 4.5 months to the point where I nearly dumped him. I should have at this point. It was also during this 4-month period that I learned a lot of unsettling things that I wrote off, but I shouldn't have. He told me that he was a necrophile. He joked about being a serial killer, but was partially serious. And the list goes on, but those are what I could remember off the top of my head. Unfortunately, rather than dousing these flames, I only fanned them. I got back to Leesburg, and things only got worse from there. The pity got worse. My ex even outed me to his dad, who is a xenophobic. It was an accident, but I don't care. It was shitty. This could have ended our relationship. I was taking care of him in such a way that I essentially was his parent. I even had to teach him to look both ways before crossing the street. I didn't know I had a savior complex at the time, and my therapist pointed it out. And that because of the savior complex and my pity for my ex, I was burning myself out catering to him, and that I needed to get out of the relationship ASAP. It took me a while to do it, but I eventually did. When I broke up with him, I explained how I felt, and what my therapist had said. I told him the only thing that would change would be that we weren't technically boyfriend and girlfriend. But that was that. Nothing else would change. Not even 2 days after he tried to kill himself while he was on the phone with me. Fast forward to Thanksgiving. I was with my current girlfriend visiting her family, and I sent a DM to my ex asking him a question. I ended up finding out that when he and I met, he wasn't actually in an open relationship, and that he had used me to cheat on his boyfriend. I told him I didn't want him in my life anymore, but that was that. I wish that was the end of the story, but it's not. It was getting towards Christmas, and I was doing terribly. I was trying to improve my life, but nothing was going right. I lost my other girlfriend at the time, and lost most of my friends. Even my roommate's girlfriend was actively trying to get me kicked out of our apartment. I foolishly let my ex be my friend again because I couldn't take being alone, and he was worse than before. The abuse was subliminal before, but now it's outright. When he was sober, he was okay-ish, but when he wasn't, he was abusive. He claimed he loved me, but treated some transphobic girl he met in the psych ward, who he knew was using him, better than he even treated me. When I called him out on it, he threw a fit. A few days later, was on the phone with him. I ended up having a panic attack and bawling my eyes out. I hadn't cried for 4 years before this. My current girlfriend was my saving grace and helped me to finally get my ex out of my life for good. So yeah, let's not meet again, or you're losing teeth this time, buddy. I'm 19 and female. Last year I met this exchange student from India. Let's call him James. We started dating for a month or two, and he was extremely involved in our relationship. He would always tell me about how deeply he loved me, how he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me, etc. One day, we were at his house, shared to study before finals were coming. I specifically told him that I didn't come to have sex with him, and suddenly, he started grabbing me, trying to kiss me, and undress me. He was touching me, and I started to yell at the top of my lungs. His housemates arrived and helped me go. So I left, hoping to never see him again, but he had clothes that were mine. Long story short, I got them back after harassing him with the help of my brother, who's 26. A few months later, I had forgotten about him and was visiting my home country, Algeria, when my friends from uni called and told me that James was uni looking for me, and that my friends found him waiting outside my lecture asking for me and my friends to help from my class. Luckily, I was out of the country. I live in France. Then he started messaging my friends on social media asking about me, telling them he wanted me to talk because he still loved me. I was starting to really freak out since he knew where I lived, where I hanged out, and etc. One day, I was coming home from uni, and he was waiting for me at my train station to talk to me. I ran like I never did before. He also managed to find my work address and email this summer while being blocked on all social media. And to this day, I am still frightened of seeing him or him contacting me again. So, creepy ex, let's not meet ever again. Please, just leave me alone. "10 years ago, I dated this guy, David. I don't talk much about David, only to my current partner and very close friends. Talking about him just makes me nervous. When David and I met, I was only 17, and he was a post-secondary student in his early 20s. Being a near homeless gay teenage dropout with raging hormones, a complicated home life, and limited dating prospects, I jumped into a relationship with him. Our relationship progressed very rapidly, and I moved into his Toronto apartment after only a few months of dating. I was young and inexperienced with relationships. David was a horrible guy. Of course, in the beginning, it was great. We were in love, very much so. But after a few months, that began to change. One night, after our first minor fight over laundry, I got a glimpse of how angry he could get over a simple matter. That night, I had a dream in which he held a pillow against my face, smothering me until I asphyxiated. His facial expressions contorted in terrifying ways, morphing into a face of a demon. In hindsight, this dream was trying to tell me something I should have trusted my instincts. 6 months into our relationship, he no longer hid these parts of himself. See, David was bipolar disorder and ignored his diagnosis. In retrospect, I can confidently say he is a sociopath as well. As a teenager, I was not equipped to deal with this. He was incredibly manipulative, eventually keeping me away from my friends and family, especially male coworkers. He stole my money from me and put his bills and debts in my name without my consent. He would gaslight me on the strangest things, trying to convince me I was a horrible person. He constantly accused me of cheating, almost daily by the end. He would fly off the handle suddenly. He was often physically violent as well. I can't exactly remember how long I continued in this relationship, as it is a part of my life I try to forget, but it was around 2 years, I believe, maybe a little more. On my first attempt to leave him, he followed me as I left during the night. I passed through a well-lit city park on my way to my friend's house. Before I knew it, I was on the ground with David on top of me, hands around my throat. Thankfully, passerby came by to aid me. Don't ask me why I didn't report him for any of this. I was very confused. I really thought he was going to end me. I didn't tell anyone about that night for years after. He attacked me once more shortly after I left him, when we bumped into each other at a party. I found out later that he had been cheating on me the entire time we were together with multiple people, including my best friend's straight boyfriend. Go figure, right? Fast forward a few years. I'm dating an awesome guy, and I'm working as a charity fundraiser, collecting donations for nonprofits on busy Toronto streets. I get angry for some strange emails and texts from David once in a while. While changing my phone number and email address when he finds them out, I never responded to him. I'm informed that he moved to Montreal. I spot him a few times a year stalking me, poking his head out from behind a street corner while I'm working, through my window as he walks around my neighborhood trying to figure out which house I live in, or around my work office building. It made me very anxious every time he did this. Every so often, he tries to infiltrate whatever group of friends he can connect with to me. I see him pop up in social media photos with friends I have recently hung out with, despite living in a different city. I don't know how he was finding out these things about my personal life. However, all of this slows down as time goes on until a year or so passes with no sign of him. Until I get an email last year saying that he wants to talk, briefly about things that happened in our relationship. It's worded straightforwardly, not like the rants he used to send me, and I wonder if he wants to apologize to me. I don't respond, but I message a mutual friend whom I trust to find out how he is doing. My friend warns me that he still is obsessed with me, and that his mental health has declined, and they are no longer close friends because of it. He advises me never to speak to him again, for both of our sake. Out of morbid curiosity, I set up a fake Facebook account and creep his profile, sending me into a rabbit hole of links on his Tumblr and beyond. He is an artist now. I find a post with photos of one of his latest works, the creepiest freaking zine I've ever seen. It depicted an extremely bloody scenario and a poem. I don't remember the poem exactly, but it was something about gruesomely hurting a boy who didn't love him back, describing the death in detail and contending what he deserved. I am more than a little uneasy at this point. I'm actually pretty scared. 6 years is more than enough time to get over your ex. This was just obsession at an alarming level. I changed my email once more and asked our mutual friend to keep me updated if he ever decided to take a trip to my city. I also deleted my Facebook and most of my social media accounts, and I haven't seen any sign of him in over a year. I'm now 27. I've worked through a lot of the issues that David left inside of me. Now I have a really kick-ass partner and a squishy cat. I'm a university student, and my life has been pretty rad. Still, I'm always expecting to get an email or to see him down the street. I sometimes wonder if this is over, or if anything will change when he tracks me down again. Maybe he's simply biding his time. So yeah, let's not meet, stalker ex-boyfriend David, ever again. And if you ever read this, considering it my closure on a trash relationship, and go get some help. I had been dating this guy for about a month. I knew him from going to a local gig. I spoke to him a few times before swapping numbers. At first, he seemed like a bit of a nerdy type, a dressed sort, and I used to go for those sorts because I had this self-destructive personality. He told me his friend had committed suicide, and he hadn't been the same since. I felt bad for him, and we started going on dates. I eventually was quite bored of him, but as I didn't have any friends who were into music, I stayed with him for a social aspect where we would get involved and invited to these really cool parties. I had been sleeping with him, and I noticed when I could not be interested in sex, he would keep giving me drinks, and then asking me if I wanted to at least 5 times until he gave up. The more I refused it, the more he seemed to get, let's say, angry at me. This anger is ultimately what I think caused him to drug me. He invited me to this party, and he supplied the alcohol to me. It didn't seem suspicious that he wouldn't drink from the bottle of vodka he gave me, as he said he only wanted to drink cider, and the bottle he gave me was only a fifth full. I drank it like I normally would, but around 30 minutes into the party, things got really weird. I was talking to a girl, and felt like I was coming up on ecstasy, except everything started to glow gold, and felt really in love with this girl. I am the most socially awkward person, even after drinking, so it was really strange to me. I started to see fractals, and then I looked behind me to see him, and then suddenly, I blacked out. I eventually came to consciousness while throwing up at my friend's house down the road from the party. I had no clue how I ended up there. My friend told me what had happened. She said she came to the party, and I could barely walk, and wasn't answering properly. And when I got to her house, I was frothing at the mouth, and took off all my clothes, and started rolling around on the grass. Apparently I was shouting my hallucinations, thinking the trees was made of gold, and my friend's foot was a fox. She said I had gone upstairs to drag myself back and forwards by my ass along her bathroom floor like a dog with fleas. I was overheated and wasn't responding. It really upset me that she hadn't called upon an ambulance or anything. I took a drug test, and my mom was drug testing me at the time, as I was a frequent user and was still living at home. There was nothing on the test. I was confused as hell. I then just dismissed it and thought maybe I got too drunk. It always bothered me in the back of my mind, as I never drank to that extent. I asked my boyfriend, and he says I drank a whole big bottle of vodka, but I had only had a fifth. Now at the time, I really shouldn't have been suspicious of him, but I have Asperger's, so I often be quite naive on these things. Flash forward. I'm going to a festival with my friends. I didn't want to go with him, as I was spending time with my friends. However, he said he was going to the festival with his own set of friends. I told him we could meet up at the festival as a big group for a couple of hours, and then split off in the evening. I am eating pizza at my friend's house, and I got a phone call from my boyfriend saying that he is on our street. I am really confused, and he says his friend can no longer come. I get quite annoyed that he came uninvited, however. I just think that I can stop him from coming around in the evening to my friend's apartment, and get her to say that she has no room for him. We go out with my boyfriend to the festival, and he buys drinks. I have rum, which I share with my friend, and he buys champagne. Weird, but anyway, I see some other friends at the festival, and we were hanging out when he starts saying some weird stuff about how he looks like a school shooter and could hurt someone very easily. But not in a funny way. He makes it sound serious and malicious. We get a horrible feeling and try to secretly ditch him in some way. But suddenly, he says, "Oh, let's go see my friends who are playing over here." We thought, yes, he has friends here? We can get rid of him there. Though it was strange he said that his friends weren't going to the festival. So he went to see his friends, and they say to him, "We've been looking for you everywhere, dude. Texting and calling, and you haven't responded to us. We were supposed to come together," to which he responds that he was with me. This whole time, I was starting to feel quite woozy and weird, like I had smoked joints, but was only smoking cigarettes that he had pre-rolled, as I was too drunk to roll them. And I hadn't been rolling cigarettes for long, so it was pretty terrible anyways. I say to him with my friend that we were going to leave now, and our taxi is waiting on us. With relief, me and my friend dart off to get our taxi home. However, what we didn't know was that he was catching up to us, and he eventually got to us after 2 streets of chasing us and asking if he could come. We said no, to which he kept pushing us, and we just shouted no. However, he waited by us whilst we were waiting for our taxi. And when the taxi came, he just got in, and we were too drunk to know what the local thing was to do. We just said, I guess you can come for an hour, but you can't stay over. We let him into the apartment, and he spent 2 hours talking to my friend's housemate about how evil I was, and my friend's housemate was really freaked out and told us in secret that she was scared. I told my boyfriend he had to leave now, and he said he wouldn't leave unless I came with him. Kept pushing me to go and stay with him instead, and I kept saying no until he gave in. I opened the door to let him outside, and then quickly slammed the door and locked it. He waited outside for 2 hours until he gave up, and tried spam calling me all night. I broke up with him then. I have since been known as the most insanely high girl ever, and keep having people come up to me telling me about how they saw me at the party with this guy, dragging me around, and my pupils were dilated, and I was going really, really crazy over things. Anyway, I knew it was research chemicals, because he was obsessed with them looking back on it. He would keep talking non-stop about his crazy trips on various weird, unknown drugs. Also, his dad is a chemist. The cigarettes were hash-spiked. Creepy ex-boyfriend, let's not meet again.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.